Something happened that turned this family's world upside down, leaving a massive gap and almost ruining the lives of the kids due to the terrible loss. Let's dive into this true crime story about a woman named Violet Rose Newman. It's a sad and shocking tale because she was murdered in a way that brings shame. And what's even more surprising is that there have been no arrests made and no one has been connected to her death. It's like a puzzle with missing pieces, and we're left wondering about the mysteries surrounding this unfortunate event. There's a lot more to uncover in this story, and it's like peeling back layers to reveal what really happened to Violet Rose Newman. We're inviting you to join us on a journey where we'll uncover the details surrounding the heartbreaking death of Violet Rose Newman. We're about to dive into the story, peel back the layers, and piece together what happened. Before we get into the details of this case story, we want to pause for a moment and share our thoughts and prayers with the families who are going through a difficult time because of this tragic incident. It's never easy to deal with the loss of a loved one, like Violet in this case. We sincerely hope that the affected families find the inner strength to cope with the pain and continue forward despite the challenges. Loss is tough, but the support and care from those around you can make a significant difference during such trying times. Our hearts go out to them as they navigate through this period of sorrow. Imagine this. It's been a whopping 35 years since a mom went through something awful and got brutally murdered. Now, think about the detectives from the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office. They're like real-life detectives you see in movies, and they've been working hard all this time trying to figure out who did this terrible thing. It's like a mystery that's been hanging around for a long time, and they're not giving up until they solve it. Let's take a closer look at this story and see what they've been doing to find answers over all these years. Let's go back to the evening of October 25th, 1980. At around 5 p.m., Violet Newman, a 57-year-old mom with 4 kids, finished up her work at the South Glen Mall. Meanwhile, her husband had been out bowling and got back home around 7:30 p.m. Here's where things take a turn. When the clock ticked past 1:30 a.m. and Violet still hadn't come home, her husband started getting worried. At that point, he decided to call the police because something just didn't add up. It's like the beginning of a mystery, and we're about to explore what happened next. I had just moved out, and my dad called me about 2 a.m. and asked if I had heard from her, said Violet's son, Greg Newman. I said no, and then I thought I knew right then something was up. The story takes a sad turn as the day after Violet Newman went missing, some hikers made a heartbreaking discovery around 2:15 p.m. in Castlewood Canyon. It turns out they found her, but it was a tough scene. Violet wasn't wearing any clothes, and she was covered with just a plain white sheet. It's like a somber moment. To make things even sadder, she had been shot in the head, which is hard to hear. The investigators who looked into the situation believed there might have been something even more terrible that happened. They suspected she might have been sexually assaulted. It's a tough and emotional part of the story, and it adds a layer of sadness to the whole situation. Let's explore further to see how they tried to find answers and justice for Violet. Now, let's talk about Jim McCord, a retired detective from the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office. He took the lead in trying to solve this mystery and find out what really went down with Violet Newman. He believes that someone, somewhere, shot her from behind while she was in her yellow Chevrolet station wagon. It's like he's piecing together the puzzle, trying to understand the details of that moment. There was a copious amount of blood here, McCord said, motioning to what would be the passenger seat of an automobile, as if someone had pushed her over and drove. After Violet went missing, the police discovered her station wagon 3 blocks from her home. Now, here's where it gets interesting. According to what investigators learned, a person saw a young white guy parking her car, and he was all by himself. Someone saw a piece of the puzzle, and they're trying to share it to help solve the mystery. They think this happened sometime between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. on October 25th. There's another part of the story where a woman reported something scary. She said a guy with a gun walked up to her in the May D&MF parking lot and told her to give him a ride. Imagine how frightening that must have been. The guy is described as a white dude with short red hair and a pug nose. Detectives are trying to link this reported person to Violet's murder. They can't say for sure if he's connected to what happened to Violet, but they're thinking there might be some link between him and her murder. It's like they're exploring every lead to figure out the whole story, and this guy with the gun is part of that mystery they're trying to solve. Let's keep digging to see how this piece fits into the larger picture. Here's where things get a bit tricky. The police, even after all their searching, never found the weapon that was used in Violet's murder. Detective McCord was like a super sleuth, trying his best to follow every lead and explore every angle he could find. It's like he was determined to solve this puzzle and bring justice to Violet. In 2004, they thought they might have a breakthrough when they got a DNA sample. They were hoping it would lead them to new clues, but unfortunately, it didn't. It's like they hit a roadblock in the investigation. The case kind of went quiet for a while, but the important thing is they didn't forget about it. It's still in their minds, and they're ready to pick up the trail if any new leads come their way. How are you gonna forget stuff like that? You know, pictures of Mrs. Newman at the autopsy and the crime scene? I remember a lot of that, he said. I feel cheated because my wife never met my mom. My kids haven't, Newman said. In due time, this person will be brought to justice. The Arapahoe County deputies are reaching out to all of us. They're asking anyone who noticed something strange on that particular day to come forward and share what they know. If you recognize the guy in the picture they put together, they want to hear from you too. It's like they're inviting us to be part of the investigation, like real-life detectives. Here's another thing they're curious about Violet's clothes. Turns out, they never found them. Considering what happened to her, there would have been a pretty significant amount of blood on her clothes. Now, let's dive into the interesting aspects surrounding the family of Violet Rose Newman. There's a lot of curiosity, not just about Violet herself, but also about her family. Those who are still living, those who have passed away, and those who might be missing or not in touch. It's like a puzzle with different pieces that make up her family. Violet, at her core, was a mom to 4 kids, taking care of them and sharing moments with them. She was also the wife of Ronald Ansel Newman, a wealthy multimillionaire who lived until 2003. As we explore Violet's life and the people in it, we uncover not just a mystery, but also a tale of family, connections, and the twists life can take. Let's meet Violet's crew, her kids, in order from the oldest to the youngest: Scott, Jill, Mark, and Greg. Now, something is interesting about Scott, also known as Ronald Scott Newman. Right after his mom's murder, he ended up in a special place, like a big hospital. Unfortunately, he left us at the age of 46, but here's a twist. It wasn't because of anything bad. It was just natural, like how sometimes people get sick. Now, let's talk about Jill Newman, the one and only daughter in the family. After Violet's murder, she kind of drifted away from the family, and, well, no one has heard from her since. It's like she vanished from the scene. People say she was into some pretty unusual stuff, like being satanic and practicing witchcraft. There's even a story going around that she left a voodoo doll in Violet's casket at the funeral. That's some mysterious and eerie stuff right there. But here's where it gets even more interesting. In Ronald's will, the legal document that outlines who gets what after someone passes away, Jill is supposed to receive some money. However, here's the twist. She never claimed it. It's like there's this pot of gold waiting for her, but she's nowhere to be found. The internet doesn't seem to have any trace of her existence, except for those old family photos. It's like she's become a bit of a mystery herself. Now, let's shine a light on Mark Newman, who's now 65 years old. Since his mom's death, it's like he's been caught in a tough spot, unable to break free from the memories and emotions that haunt him. Doctors have given a name to what he's going through: severe depression and anxiety, and it's likely he's dealing with something called CPTSD, which stands for Complex Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. It's a heavy load to carry. Currently, Mark is getting by on something called SSDI, which helps him financially, but it's not an easy road. He's living on the edge of poverty. His haven is his living room couch, a place where he can find a bit of comfort amid all the challenges he's facing. But here's the thing, it's also kind of like a living coffin. It's a metaphor for how tough life has been for him, almost like he's trapped in his struggles. Now, let's shine a light on Greg Newman, the youngest of the bunch at 64 years old. He's not just any regular person. He's got this big real estate business going on in the Denver area. It's like he's a big shot in the world of buying and selling houses and land. Now, here's an interesting part of his story. Back in the day, he was like the ultimate sidekick to Ronald, almost like his superhero partner. People would even say he was Ronald's right-hand man, always there to help out and get things done. But in 2003, when Ronald passed away, things changed for Greg. It's like he stepped into a new role, becoming the trustee of the Newman Family Trust. Being the trustee is a big deal. It means Greg is the person in charge of making sure all the money set up for the Newman grandchildren, probably Greg's nieces and nephews, and for Mark, his brother, is looked after and used the right way. It's a big responsibility, kind of like being the guardian of the family's treasure chest. Now, let's talk about Violet Rose Newman's case. It's like a puzzle that we're trying to solve, and it's not an easy one. Violet was taken away from us in a really violent way, and it's something that's hard for everyone to understand. The Colorado case files, which is kind of like a big book of all the important details, is where they're keeping all the information about what happened to her. Here's the thing, they're still actively looking into the case. It's not something they've just put on the shelf and forgotten about. They're even asking people who might have seen something to come forward and share what they know. It's like they're putting out a call, saying, hey, if you were there or saw something, let us know. They're hoping that someone out there might have a piece of the puzzle that could help them figure things out. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. If they get a clue, a hint, or even the name of someone who might be connected to what happened to Violet, they're not going to waste any time. The investigators are ready to kick things into high gear, like turning up the intensity. It's going to be like a detective movie, where they start digging even deeper into the details to find out the truth. So, Violet's case is still an ongoing story, and we're waiting to see what the investigators will uncover next. We really want to know what's going on in your mind about this case. Share your thoughts with us. And hey, if you're into crime stories, we've got more videos on our channel that you might find interesting. Tune in for the next video, and let's keep the conversation going.